So within this, there are several approaches that we need to consider, and in many cases, transversal approaches. So in the first side, fostering science and strengthening science within each of these different fields is critical, and especially now with the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So within this decade, there is a need to transform knowledge systems to support sustainable development, to start measuring more of these impacts and cumulative impacts in order to achieve solutions for our ocean, to deliver best practices and to deliver the best available information to policymakers, to accelerate change and transfer of knowledge within the scientific community and also within education, to reduce vulnerability of coastal areas and hazards hazards that are generated to coastal areas, and to increase the observation of our ocean in order for us to better predict the ocean and to manage the ocean. So, for example, we can talk about research in terms of participatory management schemes with communities, but we can be also talking about high-level technology, for example, as shown in this photograph, which shows deep sea exploration and how this information can be transferred, for example, to research vessels and from satellites to research stations, and from there that information across the world to educational systems and to communities for better management and for better knowledge by all from the research that has been developed. Another important thing to consider as we move forward with ocean sustainability is finance and the need for innovative finance of ocean protection and sustainability and conservation. So exploring different management schemes, for example, in terms of paying for access, for example, for some ecosystem services, developing, for example, visitor fees for marine protected areas, developing blue bonds or payments to mitigate certain impacts. Looking at all these sort of market-based approaches and economic approaches is critical as we move forward. And within that, another approach within the economy is circular economy. So making sure that we reduce the waste that we generate as much as possible and that we use the waste as much as possible. So for example, fishing nets in some industries are recycled and upcycled to materials that are used in textiles, for example. And this can lead to an increased efficiency in resources and reduced threats to ocean ecosystems. So in this same regard, talking about economy and financing, the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy generated a report that showed how sustainable ocean investments can yield even 5 times greater benefits than the costs. And this in terms of benefits to health, benefits to the environment, and also economic benefits. So it is a critical need for us as we move into ways forward for solutions for the ocean to look at these solutions on a broad variety of levels, not just in terms of science, but also through our economy, through our innovation, and look at solutions through a transdisciplinary approach. On the same level, we can think about developing guidelines and the need to develop guidelines for best practices and to adopt guidelines and translate these into different communities and countries worldwide. So for example, the voluntary guidelines for securing rights to land and to fisheries and also to forestry has been adapted in multiple countries. And guidelines, for example, in terms of mainstreaming biodiversity within decision-making processes within countries have also been translated and adapted into multiple countries. So in this context, it's important to develop a series of guidelines and best practices that work locally and develop these into different languages and give people the power to provide feedback to these guidelines and to adopt and take ownership within these guidelines. And of course, this can be partnered together with media and together with education. And finally, have guidelines for best practices that allow stakeholders to work together towards a common goal. Within this, and talking about common goal, it's important to highlight the need for international collaboration for our ocean, and especially considering that the high seas make up most of our planet's ocean. And within this, there are a series of international conventions, such as the UN Convention for the Law of the Sea, and also a series of international negotiations that our governments take part of. For example, the current negotiations on biodiversity for areas beyond national jurisdiction. And so it's important for citizens and for organizations to take part in these conversations, to share their voices, to understand what is being done in areas beyond their national jurisdiction in order for us to fully protect our ocean. Likewise, there are regional management organizations such as RFMOs, regional fisheries management organizations, that bring countries together to define fisheries management schemes and operations. And in this sense, it's important to highlight the need for governments and countries, but also organizations and scientists and citizens from across borders to come together and cooperate as we move forward with sustainability of our shared ocean.